Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux taking a look at race number 8 at Saratoga on Sunday, one of a slew of state-bred stakes races. Here's the field for the Fleet Indian. Fillies and mares going 1 1/8 miles. It's a big purse, $200,000. 9 entered, including the morning line favorite, the 8 My Main Squeeze. My Main Squeeze is also cross-entered on Friday at Charlestown. She'll be tough, obviously, if she's back in with New York bred. She's been taking on some really good open competition.
Obviously dropping out of graded stakes competition. And I thought, looking at the 2 1/8 events, the one for the boys, the Albany, and this being the Fleet Indian, I thought the Fleet Indian was the better betting race. I think there are several horses in here. I probably could make a case for 4 or 5 of them, Dan, for the top spot. You have horses such as Landed, who I think should be pretty tactical in this spot. Caldwell's Loves Gold on the outside, I think, at a price is an interesting horse, as well as some others in here. Chad Brown's Runner, I thought, was respectable last time out as well. So I think this division here for the girls is quite strong.
Distance, a big question mark for several of these horses, including My Main Squeeze if she runs here. Her 2 prior starts around 2 turns didn't go very well, but again, she was in against much better horses. Here's our Timeform US pace projector, and Landed is quick. She's raced once around 2 turns in her career at Keeneland, and she got through it in a gate-to-wire performance. Similar tactics expected under Johnny Velasquez.
A filly that's really done nothing wrong. Actually, the only race where she really wasn't near the front or on the lead early was her debut, and she was still able to recover there and finish third, came back to win next time out. I do think she's the speed in here. I don't know if I would say necessarily controlling, but you would think off her last effort, she went very quick going 7A. She does need to stretch out here, but we talked about some others in here. Both the 7 and 8 have shown that early foot. Sweet Brown Sugar, I know, comes out of 2 races at the Finger Lakes, but even those races at Aqueduct, I think the paces in those were quick. Not as necessarily as quick as we've talked about with Landed, but the pace should be hot here.
And that could work to the advantage of a horse like the number 1, My Shady Lady, who's coming into this race off of a win. That was her route debut, and they found a good spot for an off-the-turf race going 1 mile, sort of 1.5 turns at Saratoga, and she earned a career-best 75 Beyer speed figure. So you could make the argument she's coming into this race in her best form, and she really seems to like Saratoga.
Yeah, the question I have, though, with that last race, it was a nice performance, but you talked about it. It came off the turf, and just knowing that 4 other rivals stayed in there for her. There were a ton of scratches out of that race. Makes me sort of question, how good that race overall was. For her, it was a career best figure. I think she took a nice step forward, and maybe part of it just was getting around 2 turns. But she's going to, in my opinion, need another big step forward to compete with the others in here.
Landed, the number 2, was no match for My Main Squeeze back in February, but it appears she's a much more mature individual now, having won 2 in a row, including the Bowery last time out. And Landed handled a wet track very nicely. Her game is speed, as we see from the Timeform US pace projector. She pushed a very solid pace in this race, and she gets the jump on Caldwell Loves Gold, who comes with a solid late run to get second.
Yeah, look at the fractions: 22, 44, and 4, 110 and 2 for a final time of 123 and 3. I mean, the speed was certainly on early in that race, and she pressed it and then found herself on the lead. And I thought the way that she just finishes things up here was quite nice. Obviously, there was late charge in there from Caldwell Loves Gold, but for her to have that little bit of a freshening, I thought it was a good performance. And for her, her speed can certainly play to her advantage. It just doesn't do that at the 1 1/8 distance.
Bernie Takes Charge really started her career on the right foot, earning 3 consecutive stakes placings, but things just haven't gone very well in her last 3 starts. If you want to make excuses, I guess you can. One was on the turf, perhaps dirt is her best surface. One was on a muddy track at Saratoga when finishing behind Landed. Maybe she didn't care for the wet track, but she had to be vanned off last time out. They're showing a lot of confidence running her back in this race.
They are, and they wanted to try her at a 1 1/8 last time. I will say, when you look at that race in terms of what she would have faced, the winner, Smokin' Hot Kitty, came back to finish third in a $125,000 stakes race. Even the runner-up was a nice second with a big Beyer and a starter optional claiming event. Actually got an 83 for a second place finish. So, that was going to be a tough spot for her. But, Dan, she did take a lot of play in that race in terms of her off odds. So, depends what sort of camp you are in. I mean, obviously, I like some of her races going down the page, but there have been times where I feel like she needs more. She can't really pass horses in some of those races, and that's going to be a concern here because I don't think she will be on the lead.
Dolomite, the number 4, might be a sleeper for Chad Brown because she ran very well in her one start going a mile and an eighth last year. That was the grade 2 Demoiselle, only her third lifetime start. She finished third. She returned off of a lengthy layoff in this sprint race at Saratoga, and it just looks like the perfect prep for the Fleet Indian, where she settled off with the pace, made a very nice move on the turn, and once she struck the front, she just goes about her business in a professional manner.
Yeah, she probably is the sleeper here out of the horses that are, say, I don't know, 8-1 or less in the field. She's 5-1 morning line. I thought this was a really nice performance at Saratoga, especially off that long layoff. It's the first time we saw her and the only time as a 3-year-old filly. I think she can take another big step forward. She has a mile and an eighth race under her belt. It was muddy track conditions though, and I thought it was an okay third. She didn't pass horses like she has in her 2 wins, but at least she sort of hung around there and still tried. And it was her only time that we've seen her go long. So excited to see her again go long. And I think this is the right sort of move by Chad. Get her sprinting, get a win under her belt. It was a career best effort, and now take her a step forward.
It'll be the stakes debut for the number 5, Call Her Bluff, but if there's any time for her to try it, it's now. She's reeled off 4 consecutive wins for a hot barn and Rudy Rodriguez, and she can win with any sort of running style. She can win from on the lead, and as she showed last time out in that off-turf race going a mile, she can win from out of it. The question is the mile and an eighth, but she looks like a professional solid sort that just needs to run a little faster on the figs.
And her last 2 wins, though, have been quite easy. One of them was a career best fig for her 2 starts back when she just crushed that field. And even last time out, considering she was sort of towards the back of the pack and made a run and still drew clear, I think they've been nice performances. I think I can't blame the connections for trying her against stakes competition as a New York bred. I think this is the right spot to do it. And I don't see any issues for her at the mile and an eighth distance. I do think it's whether she can keep the win streak going at this level.
Maggie's Palace, the number 6, is coming into this race perhaps as an under-the-radar contender for Jimmy Ryerson. A winner 2 starts back sprinting. She found a tough spot in her first race at Saratoga this week. That was against older horses going a mile, and she faced a graded stakes caliber filly in Sterling Silver, who got a perfect trip up the rail. Maggie's Palace was only second best that day. Another horse that's going to be tested at distance, but she's at least bred for it.
She is bred for it when you look at her pedigree. And I thought her mile effort, it was good. Obviously, it was a big margin of defeat, but you talked about the winner and the talent that she has. Another one, I feel like it's a similar story with a lot of these horses. They come in here off a good race, but they're going to get tested for class. I do think this field overall may be a tad tougher for her, but she has the makings to take it up a notch here. And the barn, they don't have a lot of starters at Saratoga, but I thought overall from their sample, they've done quite well at the meet.
The 7, Sweet Brown Sugar, brings a ton of speed to this party. We saw her in the New York Oaks last time out, and she made the lead going a mile and a 16th. It was her 2-turn debut. I just thought Caldwell Love's Go was better than she was. She ran right by Sweet Brown Sugar in the stretch. Now Sweet Brown Sugar has to stretch out another 16th of a mile and potentially deal with a horse like Landed to her inside in the early half of the race.
But I don't want to say she can't pass horses. We saw that 4
Right.
starts back at a 6.5 furlong race, right? And I keep on going back to her as would I use her in the exotics? And I think I could see making a case for her for that reason. It was different last time out, but as we've said with so many, she was finally going around 2 turns for the first time. She was just those second best. So for me, I'm curious to see what the tactics will be. Jose Lascano has been aboard her before. And if you go back to those starts, every time he's been in the iron, she has not been on the lead for that first, say, opening quarter, eighth of a mile. She makes her way to the front from then. And very curious to see. I think he'll be patient with her. I think he'll be kind of mindful that Landed has so much speed. And maybe you don't want to be chasing the pace either. But I'm very curious to see her trip. And I think at a right price, I could be convinced to use her. Look at her resume. She's really done nothing wrong. And not all of her wins have been at Finger Lakes. She's been able to do it at Aqueduct.
My Main Squeeze, the number 8, has won her last 4 starts against New York breds on fast dirt, and she's just been competing against better horses recently, including the Grade 1 test last time out at Saratoga. This is a sloppy track. She handles that just fine as well, having won the 8 Bells on Kentucky Derby weekend. A good effort in the test to finish third behind Ways and Means, who's one of the better filly and mare sprinters in the country. The distance could be a big question mark for My Main Squeeze. A mile and an eighth if she runs here. I can see her getting a good trip tracking the leaders, however.
Her efforts at 7/8 and a mile, they've been both pretty solid, right? She's been able to rattle off some wins, and it is a huge drop in class. I think looking at her 8-5 on the morning line, her figures are better. Are they that much higher than others in here? I beg to differ at that level. Obviously, she's coming out of some big races as well. So when you go down the page and you see her in her margins of victory against some of these same fillies again, I think I can poke a couple holes in her here, especially at this distance. I find her vulnerable, but at the same time, we know how this goes, Dan. I mean, on her class alone, coming out of those races, if she wins by 5 lengths, would we be shocked? No. But if she also finishes third or fourth, I'll feel the same way. I won't be surprised.
Caldwell Loves Gold finished behind Dolomite when they met in the mile and an eighth Demoiselle last year, but I wonder if a wide trip from an outside post worked against Caldwell Loves Gold. We saw her rally stoutly for second, going 7/8 against Landed 2 starts back, and then she backed that race up with a fine performance in the New York Oaks, a race where she sat just off of the lead. When it was time to go, she went, and I really liked the way she finished it off. It showed me that at least a mile and a 16th is fine, and I think with the right trip, she can get the 9.
I agree. And I think the big thing that I would argue is I do think she's better as a 3-year-old than a 2-year-old. Her numbers have progressed. You could draw a line through that first race in between those 2 freshmen, right? The East View, she ran meh. That's how I would describe it. It wasn't great. And the number was really light. But then they tried her on the turf. Draw a line through that. Those last 2 races have kind of shown her caliber. And she's done it in very different styles. Obviously, the race at Saratoga, when we showed she was a well-meant second, Landed was on the lead. This filly was closing from far off of it on a muddy track. That can be really difficult to do, even if the pace is there. And sure, she didn't get the win, but she was, to me, it's clearly second best there. And then last time out, I like the way that she stretched out at Finger Lakes, and she was much closer to the pace. So I do think with the outside post in here, Florent Giroux has some options with her, and I think she will be into a good kind of striking position early on.
Well, let's take a look at our top selections for the Fleet Indian. We'll try to beat My Main Squeeze if she's in here. We'll try to do it with Caldwell Loves Gold. It just seems to be coming into this race in good form. Landed Speed is dangerous as well. I'm beginning to have a little remorse, though. I don't have Dolomite in there.
Yeah, and I'm having remorse after looking at this again with the 7 Sweet Brown Sugar. I do think she's one to certainly use in the bottom of things. I think it's going to come down to trip, but looking at us, our top 2 are the same. Everyone else is different. So I think it's a wide open betting affair.
We'll see if Caldwell Loves Gold can make it 2 stakes wins in a row. She runs in the Fleet Indian, perhaps against My Main Squeeze. We'll see if she competes Friday at Charlestown. Good luck.